Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, for being here. Thank you. This is such an important event for all of us because we do want to address this very important issue that is happening right now. My name is Huri Gedelekian. I am the chair of NGO CSW New York. Thank you again for being here. As we know, there is so much happening globally that needs our attention. And yet the brave women of all ages and all those supporting them in Iran need us right now. As most of you know, NGO CSW's mandate is to provide an open, safe space for all voices to be heard. As we prepare for CSW 67, we wanted to highlight this specific topic, which is relevant to all of us. Please do introduce yourselves in the chat and feel free to interact, react, and comment, ask questions. I have a dear colleague here from US Women's Caucus, Beth Dagan, an Iranian, who will help me interact with you all. And as you all know, I always like to really hear your comments too. There is interpretation today. Please click on the globe and choose the language you want. And I want to thank our global advocates with NGO CSWs in the regions who helped organize this event, as well as our sponsors listed in the program. Please look at the program. We will put the link in a second. We are also happy to welcome our partner at UN Women, who work diligently on gender equality for transformative change. They will be listening, responding, and bring our voices to their teams. They are only here as respondents. They are not part of the panels. So respect all of that. And please, I think the goal here is to hear from all the activists from around the world, both in Iran, diaspora, Middle East, and globally. Ultimately, we want to take advantage of Secretary General's call for system change at United Nations and create spaces where we can stand for each other. The voices you will hear today, including mine, are part of those system change. I also want to share this open letter for your consideration to sign on. It is for a global action in solidarity with Iranian women and girls who are courageously demonstrating peacefully for their fundamental human rights. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Azadeh Khalili, a former NGO CSW New York Executive Committee member, herself an Iranian American, active in local and global activism. Azi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Huri. And it's always good to be back home with my sisters at the NGO CSW New York. A warm welcome to all the participants who have joined us from around the world. We are witnessing an interesting moment in history. We are witnessing many women from many corners of the world playing visible and central role in uprisings, demanding for better conditions for ourselves as women and for our communities, societies, and nations. As an Iranian-born woman, I stand in solidarity with Iranian women in Iran and all those women fighting for their liberation around the globe. Last month, the murder of the 22-year-old Mahsa Amini ignited an uprising led by Iranian women that is vigorously resisting the repressive forces of the Iranian regime. The demonstrations in Iran, led primarily by young adult women, are more than just protests against an oppressive regime. And these young women have been characterized as the engines of another Iranian revolution.
Como el motor de otra revolución.
We will
بالتعبير عن
about some of these points I'm making. The slogan Zan Zendegi Azadi, women, life, freedom, which originated in the Iran's Kurdish regions, has echoed throughout these recent uprisings and made its way around the world. The slogan embodies the connection between the women's uprising in Iran with other social, political, and economic issues that the country is facing in this moment. As protests in Iran began in mid-September, the government cut the internet, blocked social media platforms, and has arrested over 40 journalists as of this weekend. The regime has tried to limit the coverage of the uprising. However, the Iranian people continue to find ways of sharing their news, sharing their images of their protests with the world. Women on the ground have asked us over and over to please share these images with you, with our sisters around the world, with feminists, with members of the women's movement and human rights communities, and amplify the Iranian women's voices and demands. Now we will show images of courageous activists from Iran as they're shaping their future. This video that you're about to see was edited by Rahel Behnam. Please go ahead and show the video.
جوانه میزنم به روی زخم بر تنم، فقط به حکم بودنم که من زنم زنم زنم. چو هم صدا شویم و پا به پای هم رویم و دست به دست هم دهیم و از ستم رها شویم. جهان دیگری بسازیم از برابری، به همدلی و خواهری، جهان شاد و بهتری. نه سنگ و سارها، نه پای چوب دارها، نه گریه های بارها، نه ننگ و آرها. جهان دیگری بسازیم از برابری، به همدلی و خواهری، جهان شاد و بهتری. لا 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 زخم بر تنم، فقط به حکم بودنم که من زنم زنم زنم. چو هم صدا شویم و پا به پای هم رویم و دست به دست هم دهیم و از ستم رها شویم. جهان دیگری بسازیم از برابری، به همدلی و خواهری، جهان شاد و بهتری. نه سنگسارها، نه پای چوب دارها، نه گریه های بارها، نه ننگ و آرها. جهان دیگری بسازیم از برابری، به همدلی و خواهری، جهان شاد و بهتری. نه پای چوب دارها، نه گریه های بارها، نه ننگ و آرها. جهان دیگری بسازیم از برابری، به همدلی و خواهری، جهان شاد و بهتری. لا 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 لا
Thank you, Rahel, for editing this, this brilliant video. We really wanted to bring the images and the voices of Iranian women, old and young, to this event. I am grateful to each one of our following Iranian American women living in the diaspora for your willingness to participate on this panel. I won't read each panelist's bio since the biography is already published on our program. But let me just say that each woman is accomplished in her own field and is extremely courageous for agreeing to speak here today to help lift up the voices of the Iranian women who are in Iran. For today's program, we wanted to hear the authentic voices of women participating in this uprising. However, with the internet down in Iran and many security concerns, it was not practical for us to be joined by women on the ground. Instead, we are joined again by Raha Behnam, who is an Iranian-born artist, dancer, and performer, and daughter of Iranian revolutionaries. Raha will read excerpts from the diary written in the past few weeks by a young Iranian woman activist. She's active in the demonstrations, and every night she goes home and writes about her activities. And we are bringing her voice to you. Her writings were translated from Farsi to English. Raha, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Ozzy. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. The protests reached my small town within days of their outbreak in Kurdistan, only 2 days after people's street protests. Their exciting songs and the photos and figures of women protesters. On Wednesday, I finally found myself amidst a street protest. The first moments of being there in the street surrounded by protesters were extremely strange. Only a day earlier, I had watched these protesters from behind a cell phone screen, marveling at their courage, choking up and weeping at their actions. I looked around me and tried to synchronize the images of the street with the reality of the street. For me, the street was no longer a site of fear, but an ordinary space. Everything was ordinary, even when the security forces attacked us with their batons, bullets, and tasers. The space between me and the images I had desired had grown very small. I myself was those images. I would suddenly see myself in a circle burning headscarves as though we had always been burning scarves. I would suddenly become conscious of myself and would realize that I was being beaten just a few moments earlier. Being beaten was in reality a lot more ordinary than what I had seen on screen. There was no trace of the pain I had imagined when watching the videos. The body is warm when it is being beaten, and we don't experience pain in the way we might expect. We had seen numerous videos of bodies riddled with pellets, but those who have been shot with pellet guns say that they are not that painful or terrifying. In the street, you suddenly think that you should run and realize that you've already begun to run. The body has moved faster than perception, and the two have not yet synchronized. I even think that death is not frightening for a person who has experienced being in the street. The experience of the street suspends thought about death, and this is what creates fear for observers, seeing people who are ready to die. We are ready to die. No, we are not even ready. We have been liberated from thinking about death. We have left death behind us in the intimacy of encountering our fears and running ahead of them in the warmth of the body. Each time in the short interval before the arrival of the forces of repression, a gathering of protesters would form around a situation to create something. With the arrival of the forces, the gathering would disperse after a confrontation, only to reform in a different location. These situations were created when the protesters blocked a street, bringing traffic to a standstill. Within this short window of opportunity, the active but not so large crowd would rapidly attempt to create a situation. Now let's burn the headscarves. A woman would jump on top of a trash bin, face the cars, and lift up her fist fixed in that figure for a few seconds. Another woman would jump on top of a car and wave her headscarf in the air. Everybody wanted to join the mass of images they had seen in protest videos from the previous days and from people in other cities. Anybody, and I really mean anybody, can create an unbelievable radical situation of resistance by themselves, such that it astonishes the viewer. Belief in this I can, this ability has spread very far. Everybody knows that they are creating an unforgettable situation with their figures of resistance. These figures were already present in the unconscious of the protesters without ever having been practiced, as though they had been practicing them for years. The figure of resistance, this body recorded in images, becomes an incitement of other women's desires to strike their own figures. Oh, what desires have been released during these days from the prison house of our bodies, we women. Besides all of these, what has extended this uprising in a feminine and feminist form and now arouses women's desires the world over is the figures that protesters visibly desire to become, such that it is no longer possible to go to the street without striking the figure of one of those disobedient, rebellious, resisting bodies. Photographs were published on a mass scale that made us proud and were rapidly etched on our collective memory. The photo of Gina Mahsa Amini in the hospital bed. The photo of Gina's relatives holding each other in grief in the hospital. The image of Kurdish women in the Aichi cemetery waving their headscarves in the air. The figures of the torch-bearing woman of Keshavarz Boulevard. The figure of the woman standing solo in the street facing the water cannon in Valiasr Circle. The figure of the woman carrying a sign in Tabriz eye to eye with the forces of repression. The figure of the woman who ties her hair. The picture of the dance circle around a bonfire in Bandar Abbas, and so many others. In truth, what distinguishes this uprising as feminist is this figure-centered character, the possibility of creating images that do not necessarily capture the intensity of conflict or the cruelty of repression, but instead carry the history of bodies, a pause and a rest. Here, the figure of the torch-bearing woman, a self-sufficient carrier of history without reference to the seconds before or after it. Pause on the moment when the woman lifts her torched headscarf and flashes the sign of victory. In an endless cycle, image and figure transform into one another. Images are published and distributed, and they arouse the imagination of bodies. People thereafter go to the street, not with the bodies that they are, but with the bodies that they can and want to be, with their own imagination. Their revolutionary act is to incarnate this imagination. I could also have been Gina. In other words, I could also have died in the custody of the morality police. The image of the torch-bearing woman on the car aroused an intense desire that I also want to be that figure. The figurative desire is the distinguishing feature of the feminist uprising, the outbreak of a repressed history giving birth to a body we have been pregnant with for years. The figure has freed itself from the bondage of the face. It is a general, faceless figure covered with a mask, effaced for reasons of security, an image shot from behind, nameless, anonymous. The political body of women now circulates the streets. The figure has released women from captivity in the body and its historic subjugation, and has made the body flourish in its wake, a body that has only now discovered the possibility, the beauty of its own resistance, maturing anew. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raha. These are very powerful images, and I am grateful to this anonymous woman in Iran for writing and for sharing her mind and her imagination with all of us. It's hard not to cry or shake during this period as we're seeing these images and hearing these images. So I welcome all of us to continue to feel and stay connected with this movement. Now I would like to introduce Roya Hakokian. Roya is an Iranian American poet, journalist, and acclaimed writer. You can find her writings in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal. Roya has been sharing her mind with us for many, many years. So Roya, let's
Thank you.
Hear from you. Tell us, what are your thoughts about the Iranian women's uprising? And do you think that the regime's legitimacy is on the line? The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I've given dozens of talks in the past 6 weeks, but I have never given a talk that involved people, brought together people from so many corners of the world. And it's incredibly touching for me. And it's a wonderful segue to what I want to say and what I think this moment is doing for all of us. But before I begin, I want to do something perhaps you would find boring, but I find essential. I want to take everybody back in history to a moment in March of 1979 in Iran. And I think that's a significant moment because I think it's a moment when, if the Iranian nation ever committed an original sin, it happened on March 8th of 1979. And I think in some ways, what we're doing now in Iran, what the women are doing now in Iran, is to go back to March 8th of 1979 and try to correct what happened then. So here's the story. The Iranian Revolution took place in February of 1979. The leader of that revolution was a cleric named Ayatollah Khomeini. He had been in exile for at least 15 years. And in February of 1979, he returned to Iran from exile. And within about 2 weeks, the Iranian Revolution was declared victorious, which means that a monarchy that was 2,500 years, had a history of 2,500 years long, fell apart. And up until that point, every journalist, every expert, every politician who had asked the Ayatollah, the cleric who led the Iranian Revolution, what will you do about women when you come to power? He had said, I am simply a cleric. I have no desire to be a political leader. I simply want to help the nation rid itself of a dictator. And then I want to return to the country and just resume my religious studies. I have no plans to be in office. And furthermore, my dream for Iran is a dream of democracy, is a dream to bring equality to all people. And when he was asked pointedly, what about women? He would say they would be equal partners in the country. They would be equal citizens. So up until that point, that had been his promise. He had struck the tone of a perfect egalitarian leader. And then suddenly, when the Iranian Revolution succeeded, within a matter of days, one of the very first things that the Ayatollah suggested was to institute the mandatory dress code, was to bring the hijab, or the head covering, and the Islamic dress code, which is made up of a raincoat-like uniform that's supposed to cover your entire body in such a way that none of your curves would ever show. And then, long sleeves, long hem that would cover every leg, every woman's leg up until, under their knees. That was the idea. And he was immediately after, 2,500 years of monarchy had fallen apart, his first act was to try to institute the mandatory dress code. In other words, his first act after taking power in a country was to deprive women of equal rights, and namely of the right to choose their own dress code. At the time, in February and March of 1979, he was the most powerful man in Iran. He was the most popular man in Iran, and he was also the most feared man in Iran. Nobody at the time dared to oppose him, reject him, or protest against him. And yet, on March 8th of 1979, 3 weeks after the Iranian Revolution had succeeded, women in Iran took to the streets, and the slogans that they chanted was, "We didn't make a revolution to go backwards." This is at a time that no one else dared chant a slogan that in any way, shape, or form challenged the Ayatollah. The overwhelming majority of people in the country, those who were on the side of the Ayatollah, religious conservatives, believed that the women were obviously wrong, and even prostitutes who couldn't give up their own desires to expose themselves were wrong, obviously. And then even the overwhelming majority of seculars in Iran were against those women because they thought the women weren't willing to sacrifice on behalf of the Iranian revolution, to keep the revolution safe, to help the revolution succeed. So essentially, the entire nation was saying women should sacrifice the right to choose their own dress code in order for the revolution to succeed. 43 years later now, the revolution, the new revolution, is being led by women, and men are setting up the bonfires in which women are burning their hijabs or their mandatory headscarves. What does this say to us about the original sin? The original sin was the moment that the Iranian leadership at the time suggested that one group of people, at the time women, ought to give up their right as equal citizens in order for everyone else to have social welfare, to have equality, to live in a peaceful society. 43 years later, the nation have learned that that is wrong, that when a single minority or group in a society is compromised, that is a signal that everybody else's rights is going to be compromised, and they will come next. And we are returning to correct that historical moment now in Iran by allowing women to lead, and by showing that misogyny that presented itself in 1979, both on conservative and secular side, as a manifestation by everyone in the country that it was women who needed to be sacrificed at the altar of the revolution, needed to give up their right, are now the leaders, the pioneers of this revolution. I think it tells us all that we ought never allow at any moment in history for women to be sacrificed, to give up their rights, not just women, but any minority. And I also want to remind us all that, yes, women in Iran need us, but we need them just as much. Their victory will remind us that we are globally connected. The excitement that they have created in the past 6 weeks has set imaginations of all little girls everywhere around the world on fire. We need to be with them, declare our solidarity with them, stand with them. But you also have to remember that this is a moment that is reviving feminism in a way that it hasn't lived in a long time, in a way that we haven't seen such vast groups of women coming together globally to support one group in one country. So I want to remind us all that, yes, Iranian women need us to stand with them, need us to be their voices, but also remember we have been torn apart as a global community for many years, and we need to find the truth within us, and we need to reconnect and to remember that just like we fought the pandemic as a global community, just like we recognize that we need to address the climate change as a global community, we also need to address misogyny as a global community. We also need to connect together as a global community to fight these shared fights around the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roya, for your powerful words. And yes, the Iranian women's uprising is reviving global feminism. So true. And now we're going to hear from our next panelist, Dr. Neda Bulurchi. Neda is a human rights lawyer and a scholar at the Center for Middle Eastern Studies at Rutgers University. Neda, welcome. Neda, can you offer us an analysis of the human rights situation and violations in Iran during this uprising? We are waiting for Neda.
Thank you very much for having me, and as well,
welcome.
Thank you to my panelists, my co-panelists, and of course the women in Iran who are doing the fighting. My brief statement today on the situation does largely address the legal situation and the lack of action by the international community about the crimes being committed in the Islamic Republic. About 2 weeks ago at NYU, I went into depth about what was then really nominal actions the international community and certain specific governments had taken. And pivotally, I addressed obligations of the Islamic Republic across a number of multilateral treaties, including the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And so before I talk to you a little bit more about the actual crimes, I do want to sort of point out a few treaties, especially as we have UN Women with us. And so when we talk about the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, it is a multilateral treaty. Iran is a signatory. And there are about 6 articles that are really of pertinence here. One is Article 21 on lethal force. Another one is Article 7 on subjecting citizens to torture or cruel or degrading treatment or punishment. Articles 10 and 14 are about ensuring fair and lawful treatment of detainees and accused persons. Article 9 is about unlawful and arbitrary arrests and detentions. And 19 is about the interference and attack on expression of thought and conscience. And so when I originally gave this talk, at the time, neither the UN Human Rights Council nor the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Islamic Republic, nor the experts who form the special procedures of the Human Rights Council had taken any action. There were 0 resolutions, 0 emergency council meetings, and 0 commissions of inquiry. Worse, there were not even condemnatory statements about the violent, systematic crimes being committed with the encouragement and sanctioning of the Islamic Republic. Rather, there were expressions of concern. This changed on the 40th day after Mahsa Amini's death. There have been, I think as you all know, protests continuously across the country. Civil society actors, human rights defenders, and children have been arrested, beaten, and killed. Shortly, I think on day 40, the UN Human Rights Office released a statement asserting that 23 children had by that point been murdered. And it proceeded through its spokesperson, Ravina Shamdassi, to remind the Islamic Republic of its obligation to protect children's right to life and right to free expression and peaceful protests. As of today, according to the Special Rapporteur, more than 27 children are dead, with realistic expectations of that number being much higher. Yet, unlike the Human Rights Council, UNICEF and other UN bodies have not acted. Just today, in addition to reminding everyone of the ICCPR, I would also like to remind everyone of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is often cited as the most widely ratified treaty in the world. Iran is a signatory, and it did ratify the convention through its parliament in 1994. Pertinent articles on that convention are Article 12. Every child has the right to express their views and wishes in all matters affecting them. Article 14, every child has the right to think and believe what they choose. Article 17, every child has the right to rely on reliable information from a variety of sources. Importantly, Article 24, every child has the right to the best possible health. Article 37, children must be treated with respect and care and be able to be in contact with their family. Article 38, governments must do everything they can to protect and care for children. Article number 6, every child has the right to life, survival, and development. Now, I point out to my students that UN treaties, conventions are ideal, that they are aspirations that the international community would like governments and sovereign countries to move towards. However, I think at this point, the international community is failing because what is a hope and an ideal for adults should be a mandate for children, the innocent. I think it's necessary for the related agencies, whether that's the Human Rights Council, UNICEF, UN Women, to clarify not just concern, but also to function and produce tangible results for the most vulnerable, the most innocent, and really the most worthy among us. Appropriately, last week, the Special Rapporteur has called for the UN and international community to change things. The crimes committed are, according to the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights and the experts who form the special procedures of the Human Rights Council, quote, violations as a continuum of longstanding, pervasive, gender-based discrimination embedded in legislation, policies, and societal structures, all of which have been devastating for women and girls in the country for the past 4 decades, end quote. This is part of why there's now a movement and appeal for the UN to remove the Islamic Republic from the Commission on the Status of Women. In addition to the number of children dead, there are over 5,000 people in jails as a low estimate. Over 250 have been murdered. As part of the Special Rapporteur's strong statements, he has asked the international community to set up an international mechanism to establish accountability for the deaths, starting with Amini's. And so as part of a conversation here today, what I would actually like to ask, and we can probably discuss, is how tangible and possible is the Special Rapporteur's request? And where do matters stand on the special mechanism? And importantly, because of the lack of movement from the international community, there are questions of our geopolitics and geoeconomics impacting the situation on Iran and the lack of movement. The UN and its bodies and the international community need to address the concerns about lack of action in the face of what are mounting crimes committed by the Islamic Republic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nida, and we will be following up on some of the asks that the Iranian women have brought to this event, and this is not the last time we will be meeting, nor the last time we'll be having some of these conversations. So at this point, I want to thank Raha, Roya, and Neda for participating on this panel, and I'm immensely, immensely grateful to you for sharing your perspective with us today. Now we will listen to a song by Shervin Hajipur. Many of you have already heard this song that remind us that our power lies in our unity. I think Roya mentioned unity, and unification of women is key to our victory. So this song really speaks to unity and that our liberation is tied to one another. Shervin, he wrote this song in support of the protests expressing the wishes of the Iranian people, protesters. The main theme of the song is women, life, freedom, Zan Zendegi Azadi. And the title of the song is Baraye, which means because in Farsi. It really chronicles the many reasons why people are protesting in Iran. This song has been called as the anthem of the 2022 Mahsa Uprising. The singer was arrested on September 29th and was freed on October 4th. After this song, we will come back and go to our second panel. So let's listen to this song as we get ready for our second panel. And again, thank you to the first panel.
برای توی کوچه رقصیدن، برای ترسیدن به وقت بوسیدن، برای خواهرم، خواهرت، خواهرامون، برای تغییر مغزها که پوسیدن، برای شرمندگی، برای بیپولی، برای حسرت یک زندگی معمولی، برای کودک زباله‌گرد و آرزوهاش، برای این اقتصاد دستوری، برای این هوای آلوده، برای ولیعصر و درختای فرسوده، برای پیروز و احتمال انقراضش، برای سگهای بیگناه ممنوعه، برای گریه های بیوقفه، برای تصویر تکرار این لحظه، برای چهره ای که میخنده، برای دانش آموزا، برای آینده، برای این بهشت اجباری، برای نخبه های زندانی، برای کودکان افغانی، برای این همه برای غیر تکراری، برای این همه شعارهای تو خالی، برای آوار خونه های پوشالی، برای احساس آرامش، برای خورشید پس از شبای طولانی، برای غرصای اعصاب و بیخوابی، برای مرد میهن آبادی، برای دختری که آرزو داشت پسر بود، برای زن زندگی آزادی، برای آزادی، برای آزادی، برای آزادی.
Thank you again. We are getting ready now to go to our next panel. And I just want to say that our current moment, this current moment offers an extraordinary opportunity for solidarity, for connection and unification among women around the world. I think it's very telling that we have all these NGO CSWs from around the globe working together to make this event possible today. As we heard from our panelists, the Iranian Women's Uprising has been supported by women from all corners of the world. Now I like to welcome Lina Abu Habib, friend who will introduce the Global Solidarity panel. Lina is the senior gender advisor at the Asfari Institute at the American University in Beirut. She's a global gender consultant with deep expertise in the MENA region in Middle East. Lina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Azi. Thank you, Huri, and thank you all, friends and sisters in the first panel. We're here because of something that Roya just said. We're globally connected. Our power lies in our unity. And this is truly a global feminist moment. It's an honor to be able to be here in solidarity with our sisters in Iran. But as Roya said, also because we need this solidarity ourselves as sisters around the world who are fighting for a system change. This panel includes wonderful feminists from MENA and from around the globe, and it will be moderated by a wonderful friend, somebody who has been a feminist journalist, media expert who has been following and writing on Iran since time immemorial, but particularly now. And before I introduce Diana Muqallid from Daraj Media, the founder of Daraj Media in the MENA region, I want to start with showing a short film, one of many that Daraj Media has been producing since the start of the feminist uprising in Iran. Devon, can we take a couple of minutes? Thank you.
مردم یک کشور چه انتظاری میتونن داشته باشن از کشور خودشون؟ رفاه، رفاه، رفاه. نه چیز دیگه. خب وضعیت اقتصادی میگی داغونه، فرهنگیمون داغونه، اصالتمون داغونه. چیزی بهتر از این هست که رها و آزاد بشه.
خب بینندگان عزیز دعوت میکنم به ادامه خبرها توجه بفرمایید.
Thank you, Devon. Of course, none of these young women is alive, and that's why we're here. Without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Diana Muqallid, our moderator from Lebanon. Diana, over to you.
Thank you so much, Lina. I'm very honored to be here with you all. Thank you for everyone. I'm one of those women in the region who have been following closely what's happening in Iran with great admiration to the courage that we've seen, very few samples here in the video about young girls, young students, challenging one of the most brutal regimes in the world. This is very inspirational, not only to Iranians, to women across the globe. And this is something historic. We don't know what the coming days will unfold, but definitely this is something historic, and we should watch it carefully and be very, as much as we can, supportive to Iranian young women and girls. I'm very pleased to be in this panel. Today, we have women activists from different countries and regions, but I think what gathers us is very clear. We'll be joined by Riham Qanut-Rifai from Syria. Riham is an intersectional and ecofeminist from Syria. She's based in Lebanon. Currently, she works as a research assistant with South Project at the Arab Reform Initiative. We also will be joined by Dr. Vivian Baddan from Palestine. Dr. Vivian is an assistant professor of psychology at the American University of Beirut. She's a social and political psychologist. She is especially interested in research that is applied, transitional and transformative, and that contribute to a social change in the Arab region. We will be also joined by Hawa Varani, and excuse me if I'm spelling wrong, but Hawa is a member of the Women's Human Rights Defenders of Liberia. She is a member of the Survivor Support Coalition of Liberia and a team member of the NGO CSW African region. Also, we'll be joined by Julieta Zacatenco from Mexico. She's an intersectional feminist, sexual dissident, and young queer advocate for sexual and reproductive health and rights. At the end, we will be joined by a director of the Civil Society Division at UN Women and the executive coordinator of Generation Equality, Ms. Lupa Banerjee. Thank you, everyone. I would like to start immediately with Riham from Syria. Riham, I'm sure you as a Syrian have been following what's happening in Iran from a very special angle. You in Syria, as a woman, as a Syrian, have suffered from oppression of a regime, militias, regional and international forces, including Iranian ones. I would like to listen from you and hear from you. What are your reflections on the bravery of the Iranian women, and how do you see that from your angle as a Syrian who is still struggling from brutal regime and its allies?
Thank you so much, Gianna. Thank you all for having me today.
We can't hear you. Sorry.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you, Gianna. Thank you, everyone, also for the beautiful videos and the testimony that was read to us by one of the activists, one of the Iranian activist women there. It's you know, heartbreaking, but at the same time, it's very empowering and beautiful to see all these women and girls on the streets and in schools, and just kind of utilizing every creative way to actually protest and say what they want to say. And many of these images actually were directly triggering of certain memories from you know, the first 2 years of the revolution in Syria, and how people took to the streets and started protesting, and even by then, we can't really say that it is similar, but in many ways there are commonalities for sure. The beauty about the Iranian revolution today, or this uprising, that it's feminist in so many ways. It's about bodily autonomy. It's about you know, our rights to dress, speak, be as we want to be. It's about basic human rights for women, but also it's looking at the intersections of different things that are taking place also in Iran regarding the economic situation that is happening, and the role of all, like the sanctions, how it is also harming the people more than it is really affecting the regimes themselves, because we saw the same thing happening in Syria, and it kind of like bring us to question, is really the mechanism that we are using right now to call for accountability of these regimes on an international level, are they really working? What can we do? How can we really target the structures rather than just the surface of what change or what we can do on an international level?
From your angle as a Syrian, what resemblance have you seen? It's a feminist movement. It's true that it's a protest against a brutal regime on the wider spectrum. But I would like to see, as a Syrian, you mentioned resemblance from the early years of the revolution. But even today, I mean, we're talking here about a young generation, about TikTok generation. And I'm sure in Syria we have the same as well, but we don't see it as much. How do you describe that? How do you reflect on that?
I think, considering that we're talking about 2011 and 2012, the technology usage wasn't as prevalent as it is today. So some of the things were actually lost, some of the things that were done. However, like we know that what started the revolution in Syria was a bunch of kids in school who went out and just put some graffiti demanding the end of the regime. And these children were actually arrested and they were tortured to death. So and the whole thing is just kind of like it's a mirror in many ways. It's like these totalitarian regimes has the same manual that they're using, and it's like you see like, oh, okay, so we're gonna cut down the internet, we're gonna arrest the journalists, we're gonna say that it's a conspiracy that is happening and there's no one on the streets really, it's just a bunch of like it's just a riot, it's really nothing that we need to concern ourselves with. So and also using theocracy as a way to just kind of justify everything, that it's a like a God mandate to do this or that, and it's also like it's the hetero-cis patriarchy that is so prevailing in especially in these countries, that is just so alarming of how these institutions kind of reproduce certain gender norms, certain gender identities, and it kind of like it wants everything to be in these boxes. So if you don't fit in these boxes and do exactly as you're told, then we're gonna use violence against you. We're gonna use rape as a tool to get your obedience and your silence. So it's so similar in these things because these tactics were used and now they are being used. And this is why I'm saying it's heartbreaking, because I know how these regimes are so embedded in so many ways in their own like kind of soil, and they're really strong. And so even with how much sometimes we do, we also need to acknowledge the fact that it's a long fight against these structures.
Riham, it is important for us to know how our Syrians inside Syria are seeing the protests in Iran. Men and women. It's hard for us to get honest feedback from Syria because of the censorship of the regime, and the regime is pro the mullahs of Iran. From your context, how would you describe the Syrian, the ordinary Syrian people, men and women? How are they following what's happening in Iran? Mixed feelings, hopeful? Will the liberation of Iranians be inflicted on the Syrians? How would Syrians from inside look at what's happening in Iran?
I think that, in many ways, it's definitely mixed feelings for especially those who were on the front line with the Syrian revolution, because we know that the struggle is long, and I'm sure similarly the Iranian women knows this, because as I think a colleague previously was explaining, that this whole thing really just, if you look at it historically, you will find that it started in the 70s, and so it's just this kind of connectivity, and this also like the Syrian Iranian nexus that has been controlling different sides of the region. I mean, if the regime in Iran is shaken, then you will see that effects on the whole region, and I think that this will give more agency to people in Syria and in Lebanon, for example, and in other places as well, like Yemen. The effect of the Islamic Republic is so, it's like it's going all around the place in many ways, and there's a lot of these political allyship that is sort of like imposing themselves with force and violence on the people in the region, and this whole thing, it's heartwarming and it's beautiful and it's empowering to see you know, young women or persons assigned as female at birth just kind of, you know, saying that I don't care about this, I don't care about the system and all of where it is going. I'm going to the streets. I'm burning my enforced hijab that I didn't want to wear. And this kind of defiance towards patriarchy is definitely inspiring in so many ways. But as I said, it's also we look at it with you know, like with clenched fists, and even what that, you know, like Iranian young person, the activist who shared her thoughts and writing with us. It's exactly like that. It's like watching it sometimes is more painful maybe than when on the streets, because, you know, I remember from my friends and comrades, when you're on the street, really you feel like you're so powerful, and it's a beautiful feeling, absolutely. But then you get these regimes. How do they answer you? They answer you with firing, you know, guns at you, with rubber bullets, with extreme violence, with arbitrary arrests, and just it's again, it's mixed feelings.
Thank you so much, Reham. Yes, indeed, we're following what's happening in Iran with mixed feelings. We don't want to see what happened in Syria being repeated in Iran, but at the same time, the bravery is just giving us all hope. So let's hope for Iran and Syria and all of us. I would like to move now to Dr. Vivian. Dr. Vivian, thank you for joining us, and I would like to listen from you. We've been watching schoolgirls defying, challenging, even mocking clergies and officials from the Iranian regimes. We're talking about a new generation that was not born during the Islamic Revolution. We're talking about a generation that is facing an old regime that is brutal, but at the same time, this regime is confused on how to deal with this young generation. How would you see this moment, seeing all those young girls defying, tearing the images, stepping on the images of the leaders of Iran, going to the streets? I mean, it's very historic and it's very intense that we don't have the time to analyze it. From your perspective, how are you watching and analyzing the scene as it keeps evolving and developing from Iran?
Thank you, Diana, for this question. And thank you, everyone, for having me. It's a great honor to be with all of you in the same space. I feel quite honored. Before I get started on the analysis portion, I just really want to salute our sisters, our comrades, the students, the workers in Iran who are bravely fighting against an oppressive, repressive system that is so ingrained and that, you know, infiltrates every aspect of life. They are fighting a big, big monster, and they're doing it with bravery and vigor and zest that is inspirational for the rest of the world. But it also has given us a lot of lessons to learn by observing and watching what's happening on the ground. So in terms of my analysis of the situation, and my, you know, my heart and my eyes have been on Iran for the past 41 days nonstop. What's going on is not only an issue of, you know, demanding human rights or women's rights. What's being centered in the Iranian revolution, which is also, I'll take a step back now. My very dear Iranian friend said to me very early on in the uprising, first week, she said, I am going to dare and call this a revolution. And I'm going along with her, and I will continue to call it a revolution. I'll interchange between the uprising and revolution, but what we're seeing is revolution making, especially what the youth factions of the movement are doing. It's truly revolutionary. It's truly something that's unprecedented in at least the more recent history of Iran. So what's at the center is not just women's rights or human rights. It's a total societal transformation. It's about social transformation, political transformation, and economic transformation. And it's about dismantling a very well-webbed regime, a regime that not only governs over Iran, but also transcends into the region and has geopolitical power as well. So technically, and as Riham was saying in her intervention earlier, the ripple effects of what's going on in Iran are very likely to influence what's going on in the rest of the region, including in the Arab world as well. So to circle back to the idea of what the young people and what the students are doing, we are seeing heavy student mobilization across university campuses, across high schools, in a way that was not really expected. You know, students, at least in the past 10 to 15 years, were not the usual suspects in revolution making, correct? But at this moment, they are at the center and at the forefront. And what they're facing is really enormous barriers. They're facing brutal repression, they're facing killing, disappearances, imprisonment, and torture, you know, internet blackouts. The primary tool of mobilizing that the youth is using is social media, is their online presence, is being able to connect with one another, to organize with one another, to get to the streets, you know, to send the videos across. And they're being met with state-sponsored internet blockages and blackouts, and still managing to maneuver around it. So in terms of the creativity that the young folks and the young women who are participating in the uprising, the creativity that they're bringing in is something that's very unique, is something that is quite new and fresh, and will probably impact mobilization in the region across the board. So there's this idea of very creative tools and means that are very dynamic, not so static, that are being used on the ground, especially by the youth organizers and activists. And another very unique thing is the movement is still going, and it's still going strong, and it's still sustained, it's still spreading, it's going from campus to campus, from school to school, despite all the repression. So those are two very unique things, the fact that they're still sustained and also growing protests in terms of movement building, and there's a lot of creativity that they are bringing in. You know, we all saw the powerful images over the past couple of days of, you know, breaking the wall that separates the students, the men and the women in universities. Sure. Exactly. So that is very symbolic in a way. So the symbolism that's coming into play, you know, burning the hijabs, giving the middle finger to the supreme leaders' photos, the graffiti being stenciled all over the cities, all of it is very creative, very artistic, and also very powerful and mobilizing. So I think they're bringing that into the game that is quite unique and quite new and really impactful and effective.
Very true, but again, they are dealing with a brutal regime that didn't hesitate from killing students, killing children, and threatening with more and more violence. And we are haunted, as Riham mentioned earlier, we're haunted by what happened in Syria, and the Iranian regime was involved in the blood bath in Syria. So we're caught between two feelings. Do you share that with me?
Absolutely. So there's the feeling of hope that is crucial, right, for mobilizing, that's crucial for collective action. It's one of the key ingredients to keep social movements going. This hope, this imaginary, this ability to envision what the future is going to look like, what, you know, a post-Islamic Republic Iran is going to look like, what a post-Iran hegemony region is going to look like as well. But at the same time, you know, what repressive and authoritarian regimes do best is they try to instill fear. All of the tactics that they use are movement busting tactics. Very traditional, you know, not super creative. Also, we have to think about the fact that, you know, their tools that they're using have been used across history to repress social movements, progressive social movements and revolutions. And they're using them in very similar styles. They're more repressive now than they were, you know, 10 years ago. And they're trying to instill fear. And what we see is that regardless of all the repression, the youth mobilizers and the women are still taking to the streets. They're still participating, and they might be afraid, but I think potentially their vision for their future is stronger than that fear barrier. You know, they haven't killed the efficacy of the movement yet with their repression, and I hope they don't.
Of course, let's hope, let's all of us hope they won't. Thank you so much, Vivian, thank you. I would like to move to Hawa. Hello, Hawa, thank you for joining us. I think in today's world, especially in the case of Iran, geography, distance doesn't make a lot of difference. I would like to hear from you. How are you comparing the similarities of what you are watching and happening in Iran and with the one that you have in Liberia or the region around you? Are you following what's happening in Iran? Would you consider this is an issue that is really reaching to feminists across the globe everywhere? How do you see it from where you are?
Thank you very much, and thank to the organizers for giving me this platform to be able to speak out and stand in solidarity with our sisters in Iran. I'm from Liberia, and in Liberia, we have had a lot of challenges, especially when it comes to violence against women, which is quite similar to what is happening in Iran right now and other parts of the world. So we are looking at it from an angle that it is time now for change, because over the years, several years, women have been, you know, oppressed. Women have been, their fundamental rights have been taken away. So it is time now that we are all working, especially right now with the situation in Iran, that they are just definitely tired and they need the change. They need a change. So similarly with incidences that have happened in Liberia, where violence against women, especially sexual violence, has been really hard. And we have been speaking against that, protesting and using all sort of means that we can communicate with authorities to be able to address these issues, create safe spaces for women and girls, and ensure that they are protected in the society. So as a women's human rights defender, I'm really happy that this thing is happening in Iran, because change starts from somewhere. So with the persistence, with the engagement that they have been able to do over the past days and weeks, we are sure that this thing will lead to a change that we are all watching to see.
Thank you so much. What do you think there is in common between the struggle of women in Liberia with the ones that you are witnessing in Iran? What similarities can you draw as a feminist?
There's so much similarity, because right now we have seen the fight for freedom, especially when it comes to bodily autonomy. Women need to be free. The society does not really favor them. Patriarchy, social norms are similar, like what we see happening in Iran, because Mahsa did not wear her veil properly, so she was put in jail. So what happened here in Liberia, if someone is sexually violated, if they are raped, they blame them for not being properly dressed. They blame them for wearing maybe short or mini clothes or whatever. So they always blame the survivor, or they always expose the woman to risks instead of fixing the system. So these are all similarities. And another thing that I see that I have mentioned earlier is that the women of Iran are fighting for their freedom to political participation. They are fighting for freedom of speech. They are fighting to be able to survive and live in a society where they can be who they want to be. But the society has tied them down. It's similar to what we in Liberia are also fighting for: women political participation, freedom, women's economic empowerment, and women access to resources and different livelihood has been a huge challenge. So how can we be able to excel and live in a society that is safe and free, that women can be able to do whatever they want to do? So there are a lot of similarities with our sisters in Iran, and we stand with them in strong solidarity. Whatsoever that is going there, we are in support of those that are speaking out, those that are supporting them. And we here in Liberia are also in support of the work that they are doing in order to gain their fundamental human rights. Because we believe that everyone in the society should be given equal opportunity to thrive. And that is what we all want.
Thank you so much, Hawa, for your input. Definitely, we are all in solidarity with Iranian women and all women across the globe. Thank you so much for your intervention. I would like to move now to Julieta. Julieta is joining us from Mexico. It's a pleasure to have you here. And I would like, again, like I mentioned, like I asked to Hawa, when we talk about feminist movements across the globe, I would like to see, how do you see what's happening in Iran as a Mexican who have been facing challenges, whether cultural and official, towards women, towards all members of the community. How do you see what's happening in Iran from your angle?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super happy to be here and so honored to be speaking about this really important issue we are living in this juncture. Like the connections that I see and that I think are relevant that have been mentioned by previous panelists are young people are organizing, and young people participation in social movements now is so relevant. We're not just bringing new reflections on how to challenge oppression systems, but also we're bringing reflections on how women's movements in the global South can teach a lot to social mobilizations in the global North that have not been seen before. So what I can say is that regarding the situation in Mexico and how it's connected to the Iranian women's situation and their fight for their rights and their bodily autonomies, that here, for example, we have a lot of fundamentalist teachings that limit the capacity to decide in our own bodies. So we have been striving a lot to create an anti-patriarchal movement, feminist movements, but also from a decolonial approach to join more women from not just the capital, but also from all over the country. And I think that's a really valuable thing also from the Iranian movement, that it's bringing so much diverse approaches to the discussion and how to strive against patriarchal oppression that limits our capacity to decide in our own bodies. And this new generational tools that we're bringing in a digital era to spread the information. When back on time, it was harder to do that. Now we can see that they are doing their best to put out information so that people all around the world can join their cause and can support the cause. But I think it's also very relevant to bring these discussions with a lot of respect, trying to bring the colonial critics, not to impose the ways on how women in the South, specifically in Iran, are leading their cause and leading their fight, but to support them in the means that they have and the ways that they are doing to fight for their bodily autonomy.
This is exactly what I think we should be focusing on, how the young generation are using the new tactics. You know, just a couple of months ago, I think few of us expected what we are seeing today, because the regime shielded everything and stopped them from using internet, doing anything. Do you think this is reversible, or now we have reached a moment where it's very hard for such a brutal but at the same time traditional regime to be able to contain the young generation and the tactics that they are using?
I think this is a really hard challenge for us, because the oppressive systems and the governments who are patriarchal governments and oppressive governments and are trying by all means to stop a revolution, but we're not. And I remember some of the previous speakers were saying we are fearless, we are joining massive movements and building collective causes all together, and this is so powerful. Like, we are all joining from this wish of creating and building better futures for us, but for future generations, because we are really conscious that the world we live on is really hard. And a lot of people previous to our generations, we're fighting for it, but now we as young people, I think we're not giving up. And the women and girls and assigned female people in Iran are teaching that to us, that conditions can be really tough, that the governments are really oppressive, that the streets can be militarized, that we are put in jail. As some speakers said before, rape and sexual violence that is used as a tool to limit ourselves, to limit our power to talk, to speak up, to raise our voices. They're really inspirational, because we are learning all that. And I think it's not a cause that you can turn off at this point. We all notice the bravery these women and girls have, and we're going to continue supporting. In this place, I can feel that, like, we are really encouraged to do that, and we're going to continue focusing on that. We're not going to take our look out for of the situation in Iran. So I think that's really a really powerful thing to continue supporting and be optimistic that the situation is going to change, because we are turning the structures down, and we are doing it right now.
Thank you so much, Giulietta. It was a pleasure to have you with us. I would like to move now to Lupa Banerjee, the director of the Civil Society Division at UN Women and the executive coordinator of the Generation Equality. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure there are lots of questions, but I would like to start with, how can we still have the Islamic Republic of Iran at the UN Women's Rights Commission? I know it's a matter of votes by certain countries, but will that, don't you see the irony of having Iran in that commission? And how do you see that?
Let me start by first expressing how deeply, deeply privileged I am to be invited to this conversation. We salute the profound courage of the women and girls of Iran and the people of Iran as they fight for social transformation, for every person living in Iran to have the opportunity to live a life that they desire to live and choose. So We stand in solidarity. We stand in solidarity with all of the women and girls leading the struggles for social change all over the world, in different countries, in contexts of deep challenge, and their leadership is profoundly inspiring and is at the source of the work that we do at UN Women. We stand on the shoulders of these women and girls and people of the world. UN Women was born of this kind of activism, and we are deeply grateful. This is where we draw our inspiration, our leadership from. Thank you very much. It's a deep privilege for me to be here. In terms of the Islamic Republic of Iran being a member of the Commission of the Status of Women, this, as all of you know, and if you actually look at the public letter, and if you look at the frequently asked questions in that public letter, you will see how the Commission on the Status of Women is set up by governments of the United Nations. As you know, the United Nations is a parliament of nations. Member states elect each other through a geographical process that is determined by the Economic and Social Council, which is also composed of member states. And they determine how countries come on or not in the various governing bodies of the UN. So I will not go into how is the Islamic Republic of Iran a member of the Commission of the Status of Women, except to say that they were elected by member states to be on the Commission of on the Status of Women. And if you go through the questions, you will see what the modalities for that were and are. What I would rather talk about actually is really this, what this panel has been talking about, and what Azi's panel earlier also spoke about, which is that the enormous work that the women and girls of Iran are doing, and that women and girls in struggles all over the world. We heard Liberia, we heard Mexico, we heard Syria, and this is going on in Afghanistan, in Myanmar, in Ethiopia, in Brazil, in Latin America, in Ireland, in the UK, in the United States, all over the world. The struggle for women and girls to place their rights at the center of social transformation, at the center of a society that is equal and just for everybody. In other words, to place the issues of gender equality, the autonomy that women and girls have over their bodies, over their voice, over the space in which they live, that it is safe, that they are, and over their labor and their right to participate in the societies in which they live. They are putting this at the heart of social and political movements everywhere. That is what the Iran revolution is doing, and it is also a deep moment for us to recognize the enormous leadership of young people, and the fact that not just the Iran struggle and the Iran revolution as it is unfolding now, we see it as being intergenerational, in allyship with men, bringing all of society to the center of the table. But this is also something that we have seen in other parts of the world, when women and girls and young people are leading the struggle, that they do so in solidarity, bringing the world along. And for us as UN Women, our role, our commitment is to ensure that this finds space in the global spaces that we occupy, that we learn from this, that we build the solidarity strategies for this, that this is heard, this is expressed, that this finds a space so that we are able to work together with the women and girls of the world for the world that they seek to build and for which UN Women serves that purpose.
Thank you so much. We understand it is difficult for the United Nations to intervene into internal issues, but how can you support the Iranian in general and Iranian women now who are now being subject to brutal regime? We don't have an exact number of the detainees, of the injured, of the fatalities. So how can you help Iranians at this moment?
There are different ways in which the UN is supporting this. The UN is on the ground at this point in time. The UN Women is not, but there are parts of the UN, UNDP, and others are on the ground in the country, and there is work that they are doing there. The Office of the High Commission for Human Rights is also, through its special rapporteur and other special procedures mechanisms, looking at the violations and tabling that. There is an informal discussion at the UN Security Council tomorrow on this issue. There are the modalities that are available through the human rights mechanisms of the UN that are looking at this, including through the various human rights defenders mechanisms. But there is also the other convening role that UN Women and the UN plays in bringing attention and awareness to this issue, to the courage and determination to make sure that this finds voices, that this finds space in global spaces, to use the evidence and the data that is coming through to highlight how solidarity strategies are built, how this is center staging what the gaps in the commitments that have been made by the country, where the gaps are and how they can be held to account for that, to be able to highlight that through evidence, to create spaces and partnership platforms for these solidarity strategies to be built, so that there is cross-border solidarity for this and support for it, and to continue to amplify the voices of the women and girls of Iran and the people of Iran, their demands for a just and equal society in all of the spaces where it is important that this is heard and this is supported and this finds solidarity everywhere. And that is the role for the UN as well at this point in time, both to offer the platforms for solidarity and support, and also to use its human rights mechanisms to address the specific violations through evidence and data.
Thank you so much, Lupa. Definitely, we're looking for supporting Iranians. We don't want to see the Afghanistan and Syria model being repeated. Thank you so much for your words and intervention. I would like now to move back to my beloved friend, Lina Abu Habib. And thank you for all those who participated in this session. Thank you so much. Back to you, Lina. Lina, are you with me? I think we have lost Lina.
Yes. Thank you, Jana, for your amazing moderation as usual. May I say something that Jana has been on the receiving front of threats and intimidation from the same regime that is now killing women, at least its spokespeople, representatives in Lebanon. So I really want to salute you for your courage, for your unwavering courage in reporting, in amplifying the voices of women. Lopa, very grateful to have you with us and to have your support. Our wonderful panelists, Hawa, Julieta, Reham, and Vi, thank you so much for your heartfelt contributions. Before I turn over back to Huri, to our chair, just a couple of things. This is the first of a series of convening and conversation. This is certainly not the end of it. This is not a one show of support to our sisters in Iran. We are all in this together, and particularly from this region where the tentacles of the Islamic Republic are so wide and so outreaching. We are definitely all in this together. So this is going to be just the beginning of a series of convenings and conversation. Thank you all so very much. We will have another short film by Daraj Media, produced by Diana and her team at Daraj Media, and then Huri, if you could just come in immediately after when the movie is done. Devon, please, could we have the second film? Devon? Okay, it's coming.
بی‌عدالتی و جهالت هیکل خاکی کرانا جوان مردان از منصور و غریبان
Thank you, Lina. Thank you, Azi. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lopa. I can't even, there's so many thank yous coming out of me right now, especially those interacting in our chat. This is the part that I love the most, even though we're all apart from each other. We're on Zoom, we're in different time zones. There's a connection here. And this is what I love about what we do. We don't do webinars, we do Zoom because we want to hear from you. So please, if you keep interacting, asking questions, we have members who will be engaging with you. I am here to welcome our dear partner at UN Women, Aja Ragnar, and thank you so much for being here. It is really brave of you all to come into this active civil society, outspoken community that are gathering from all over the world. So I really do appreciate you being here. But I want to just highlight a couple of things. And if you don't mind, there is a statement I need to read that global NGO CSWs put together, and then I have one or two questions for you. But honestly, we should just be having a conversation. There's so much to pick up here and to talk about and to inspire us, so that when you are all in those high-level meetings with member states, with UN entities, you're speaking from all of our voices. That is the purpose of today, and we thank you for being here and listening to us. First of all, I just want to highlight a couple of things that I can't wait for Carla to put in hashtags on our social media. Fight misogyny as a global community or feminist community. We can replace global and feminist back and forth. This is a long fight. We know for all of us from different cultures and different countries who have been in these fights ourselves, we know that these fights keep going on because they're afraid of our power. They're afraid of our creativity, but we don't give up our fight. And I love when somebody said, this fight is long to fight patriarchy. Persistence is the key. And someone else said, silence is violence. That's why we can't be silent. So having said that, I'm just going to move right into the statement that our sisters globally helped us put together. And it's interesting. It says violence against women and girls is rampant throughout the world. What we are seeing happening in Iran or the Islamic Republic, as someone corrected us, is the acceptance of deeply rooted patriarchal cultural norms and religious fundamentalism that are used to simply suppress what should be the free expression of all women and girls, and a statewide denial of their rights. We are fed up with accepting morsels of access to bodily autonomy in ways that appease patriarchy. We accept the fact that much needs to be done in educating our own communities on the nuances of accepting what sometimes seems to be a benign comment or rules that we accept. However, what is in the streets and on full display is happening in many countries, too many more countries, as Lopa even mentioned. We understand it is difficult for the United Nations to intervene in internal issues. This was also mentioned earlier of governments. But as a global community, we cannot ignore injustice and attacks on the women and girls and the youth of Iran. In this case, we align ourselves with the people and we ask the United Nations and UN Women to use every power given to them to bring attention, awareness, and resources to the plight of women and girls in Iran. These issues are connected to the struggles of other women around the world. So I'm going to pose the two questions that came out of these discussions, and then also we can just, chat on what comes out of all of that. Can the UN and UN Women elevate these issues to the highest political policy spaces and connect agencies, as Lopa also mentioned in some way earlier, those which have presence on the ground in Iran and other global institutions, where creating political support for women's rights and gender equality for women and girls is prioritized? This could be as high as a General Assembly, the upcoming Summit of the Future, for example, and ultimately take action on recommendations. That to us is very important too. We know it at the UN, there's always conversations, but the action is definitely important. And the second question that I'd like to just go back and forth with is, again, moving forward to CSW, I think it is a critical space to bring these conversations into. And we know we always collaborate. I think we should be continuing this conversation to see how we can bring this specific conversation into CSW. Hopefully by then, we have succeeded, but this conversation needs to keep happening, because then we can empower ourselves to deal with this on an ongoing basis. Can UN Women organize dialogues between women's and feminist movements and member states examining these issues and building political will to pressure governments to stop violence against women and girls? And I'm going to stop there and then just give the floor to you, Haja. I'm sorry if I dumped way too much, but we can go back and forth and touch upon all of these points.
Absolutely. Thank you, Huri. First of all, can you see and hear me well?
Wonderful.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. So thank you, everybody, for sharing and for most of all for your bravery. It's not mine, it is yours. And you describe the different situations, both in relation to Iran, but also in other countries. And I feel very humbled to be here and privileged, as Lopa said. For us, from UN Women, we wanted to listen in today to to hear firsthand what the thinking actually is, what the analysis is, and what the requests are. Thus, we can, and I would like to think that we've already done from the UN side, been pointing to the need for increased women's rights or implementation of women's rights in Iran through a number of statements from different UN bodies, including UN Women and the High Commissioner for Human Rights, as Lopa also mentioned. But as you pointed out, Hori, we have a lot of high-level discussions coming up, meetings, etc., both internal and external meetings. And then it is important for us to both really know what the requests and demands are, and also to be thinking perhaps that we could open doors for Iranian women to express themselves. We know it's a part of UN Women's role, a very important part, to facilitate the meeting between civil society and if it is member states or other partners, if civil society want us to do so. So we can also suggest, and we can connect civil society and women's organizations on Iran and in Iran, if that is pertinent, with those who they wish to speak to, or at least try to do so. For example, I know of a number of member states mostly from the European Union who just spoke to me, who said that they would like to engage with you, as one example. But you've also seen the letter that Lopa alluded to, the open letter, where you see a wide range of prominent women from all over the globe who obviously already want to lead this work. So I think, Hori, just obviously, yes, it is our role to try to facilitate these conversations and to be aware, again, of the analysis and the claims. And that's why we want to have this listening role. And Lina said earlier that this is not the last, absolutely, it's actually the first conversation of its nature. Of this nature that we participate in, and we want to engage and we want to know. I also wanted to say that some of the points, I took a lot of notes of what you all said, and it really made an impression on me when you all both described the bravery of Iranian women right now in their struggle really for rights which are laid down in international agreements already, be it for children's rights or, for example, the Beijing platform or other important documents and agreements on women's and girls' rights. But many of you also said that this is something that the world can and should learn from. And I do think that we right now live in a very polarized world with very, there is an uprise of authoritarian thinking in relation to women's roles and situation, as well as much more of, let's say, progressive thinking within the member states. And it's now 5 years since Me Too, and I really do think that that feminists all over the world are really inspired by the courage and the leadership that we see in Iran, and that you also, all of you, represent right now. I'm also really grateful to CSW NGOs for organizing this in such a global manner, because it really does show, as you all pointed out eloquently, that this happens in similar things, although every country deserves its own understanding and must have it, but similar patterns we have seen before, and this is not something that is only going on in the global north. This is really requirements, demands, and requests that women have globally, and I think that is also very important for me and for us to take with us. I also happened to just recently have been to Liberia, and as many of you know, that is a country where women's groups and organizations to a very large extent managed to organize and actually lead the country into peace, and where they still organize for peace and also very actively try to resolve situations before they escalate to violence. So I am also very humbled by this exchange of examples, and that I think is something to take with us going forward. So sorry for a long answer, Hori, but I think what my main points is really that from UN Women's side, we want to engage, we want to know what their requests and demands are, and we want to be able to open doors, to connect, and to support whenever we can.
Thank you, Aja. And I really appreciate how you really brought all of it together. And while you were talking, I'm multitasking, which is sometimes not very good, but that's who we are, right? As women, we do multitask, and that's what our power is, superpower is. But I want to just bring up a couple of things that I'm actually also following in the chat. Yes, the demands are regime change, and we're hearing you, and that's not as easy. And there are other countries, including in Middle East, a country that I was born in, I could say, Lebanon, which, you know, every time we ask for a regime change, we get a worse regime. I mean, Lena, I'm not going to speak because I'm in the US now. You can also add your thoughts on this. So it is, and even with Iran, you know, we heard earlier in the story how it's, even with regime changes, there are still challenges, and which is why as NGO CSW, and I'm grateful for UN Women to even concentrate on all of this, our goal is to protect women and girls' voices, their bodily autonomy, their needs to live freely the way they want. Yes, I'm going to fight for regime change as well, because you hope that it will improve. At the same time, under any regime, we want women and girls free to be who they are, free to speak, and free to live and not die because they do not want to abide by rules that doesn't suit them. And I wanted to also just make sure that everybody realizes we do need to cut off at 10 a.m. I always like to be sure that people can schedule their time for our meetings and are heard. But I said this earlier, we leave our chats open so that you are all heard. And if your story is too long to put in the chat, email us at info@ngocsw.org. We want to hear from you, and we will add your stories to our notes so everybody can hear your story. Thank you, Devin, for putting that in. So I mean, and I'll just close, and I'll give you a last word, Ajad, to say that it is important that we keep having these conversations. It is also important to take action, which we heard in the chat over and over again. We can take actions that we can do, which is engage with member states, engage with UN Women, engage with each other so we can learn, just like the way we did, bringing in different cultures, different countries on what worked in different spaces and see how it can apply to this. At the end of the day, I want to just add one more thing, that we're actually learning right now, watching women and girls in Iran and how they are using this uprising, this revolution. And then we will keep sending messages back to say, we stand with you and we're going to do the best we can to support you, because not a single life is worth dying for this. So whatever you need to add, and then we'll close.
Thank you so much for those wise words and for all the questions and comments, and we'll go through them and see what everybody's opinion and suggestions are. Well, you know, UN Women's mandate is to both uphold and help implement international agreements on international norms and standards on gender equality. And there is agreements in the world that women and girls should have those rights and they should be equal and all over the globe. So that is a role that we play. That's why we exist. And I think that from our point of view, it is important to draw conclusions of what the action then actually is. So therefore, it is important for us to hear this, hear your analysis, as I said again, and then, you know, we can also see, so what is the actions for different parties and different actors here, as you point out yourself, Hori. We have different ones, and in this way, we can also make sure that whatever we do is based on what women actually want and not what we guess. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you again. And I'll repeat this again. I put it in the chat. This conversation is also going to the human rights section, OHCHR. They were in touch with us. They were very happy we're having this conversation. They might have been here at some point because I know they said they will attend. And I just appreciate you all. I mean, I'm not going to name you one by one, including UN Women. I so appreciate you giving your time, your energy, and your expertise to share and help each other. And I'll end by saying, no one is free until everyone is free. I know we keep saying that. I put this everywhere that I can, but it is very, very important that we stand by each other, that we fight for the system change that even Secretary General, as I mentioned earlier, has asked for. And we thank you all for all your energy. Please email us with whatever else you were not able to say here. And then our team in the office, and I want to thank our team. I want to thank actually all of NGO CSW Executive Committee. I know there were so many of you here globally. So I hope you introduced yourself in the chat. I tried to bring you all in, but thank you all for being here and for supporting us. Until next time, as they say, the conversation will continue. So stay in touch, stay strong, stay fighting for our rights. Thank you, Azi, Lina, Lopa, whoever I see. Bye.
Zan Zendegi Azadi. Zan Zendegi Azadi.
Yes.
Thank you.
Please unmute yourselves. You know the rules.
Zan Zendegi Azadi.
Zan Zendegi Azadi.
Women life freedom. Women life